You see that in said treaty, the carrier was defined as a ship displacing over 10,000 tons and designed for carrying aircraft. Given the first dedicated carriers, Hermes and Osho, were just below or around this limit, and it was logically felt that as aircraft size was increased, any opening carrier would have to be larger in order to be useful. But the Japanese decided to see if they could get a useful aircraft carrier out of less than this, using weight-saving techniques and creative accounting that they developed in their cruise destroyer lines. Whilst the resulting ship would be nowhere near as capable as the Kaga, matters so much as long as it had a useful flight crew and they could build as many as they liked. To be on the safe side, and also to make the side cheaper, thus easily on their mass numbers, Radeon was designed to displace 8,000 tons or so in standard displacement, going any semblance of protection on the hull of the saddle somewhere between Osho and Hermes in terms of local dimensions, as well as mapping an island. This was all in order to carry initially 24 aircraft and attain a speed of around 29 knots. This was a bit shy of what a ship like the Kaga could do. But with Kaga in the fleet, it was an acceptable top speed for the Japanese Navy since Kaga was fractionally still. With work starting in 1929, partly during construction, it was decided that she should instead carry 48 aircraft, so an entire other unit was added. So when she emerged, it appeared that the Japanese Navy had a real winner on its hands, a fast carrier that could have operated aircraft larger than some ships with double their displacement, and could half of that of ships with times their displacement. Two, this new type would offer redundancy and aircraft that needed giant complexity fast carriers, whilst also needing fewer men to crew them. But this was to a crashing point by two major developments. Firstly, the London and Naval Treaty of 1930 closed off the loophole that Russia was exploiting with a number of clarifications, specifically Article 3, Section 1. For the purposes of the Washington Treaty, the definition of an aircraft carrier given in Chapter 2 of the said treaty is hereby replaced by the definition. The expression aircraft carrier includes any surface vessel, whatever its displacement, designed for the specific and exclusive purpose of carrying aircraft, and so constructed that aircraft can be launched therefrom and landed thereon. Then, Article 4, Section 1. No aircraft carrier of 10,000 tons or 60 metric tons, or less, standard displacement mounting a gun above 6.1-inch caliber, shall be acquired or constructed by any of the high contracting parties. Section 2. As from coming into force of the present treaty in respect to the high contracting parties, no aircraft carrier of 10,000 metric tons or less, standard displacement mounting a gun above 6.1 inches or 100 millimeters caliber shall be constructed within the jurisdiction of any high contracting parties. The undertone of "this means you, Japan," could scarcely have been clearer if it was written with the margins in capitalized red ink. This caused an immediate halt to plans to build a proper carrier, which was coupled with ongoing stability issues in the ship, which were helped by the entire additional hangar deck which was featured in the original design, with the Zoom instances in the 1930s. The ship was brought back into additional strengthening and measures to try and upgrade. The initial measures taken after the first incident bring about opportunities to ship to the present during the latter incident, with crucial changes in ships their original self-flooding hangar. Without the first complications, the ship was considerably worse fate. Additional complications were then undertaken, remodeling and raising a bow as a result of standard displacement rose above 10,000 tons anyway. So even if the loophole had been closed, she would have been a practical long-term exploiter in any case. She would have proved useful as a testing ship as well as her normal duties, with many aircraft events of Japanese Navy service debuting in trials of her during the 1930s, as well as demonstrating a number of tactics, including then dive. She would also demonstrate the larger point of the German concept, most of the ship's rear element. Nonetheless, she did provide the Japanese Navy valuable experience in setting up their next attempt at Radeon, first proper lead carrier, Soryu. Whilst Soryu and Hiryu are often mentioned together and somewhat grouped into the same class, there are some substantial differences between the two ships. They were supposed to be the same, having both been organized on the same program in the early 1930s, but Soryu was laid down in 1930, which meant that while she used many of the lessons from Rougeau, the design was finalized before the two major incidents mentioned earlier, and so she was quite likely built with a relatively narrow profile and any armor protection anywhere. She was consequently a surprisingly light vessel, pulling in a barely under 16,000 ton standard load, but using was effectively an she was able to hit over 30 knots with two hangars that gave her, as designed, over 60 aircraft, including spares. This again compared very well with carriers, the treble in the aircraft first built carriers were just under double the displacement, whilst being considerably faster, and having 70 to 80% of the aircraft with various large conversions, which were in turn close to double the total displacement. But, as with Rougeau, the exciting figures in the upper hangar was low, and the ship's breath ratio was so high, the island had stuck out like intrusion to start with, in order to keep the flight very clear. The ship was very lightly built. Some minor corrections could be made post-construction, light need and weight incidents, but fundamental issues like the narrowness of the hull could not be corrected. Hiryu, in contrast, was laid down a couple of years later in 1996, and thus changes were made to her design before it was started. As a result, she would be around 2,000 tons heavier than Soryu, with a wider beam, and would actually carry some meaningful protection. Additional work to the bow made the early hull was constructed significantly stronger. The island was also placed further back along the hull, and could be in slowly compared to Soryu thanks to the greater width. As the Japanese Navy's plans called carriers to operate in pairs, Hiryu also had a unique feature that had thus far not been otherwise seen on Akagi. The island was on the horizontal side of the ship. This feature ended up not working out especially well and can't be repeated. Overall, these first three purpose-built carriers will serve well enough. Rougeau would see her aircraft and operational strike massive package drop her out of combat duty in Inukai for many operations, and Hiryu and Soryu end up feeling the pinch with sacrifices in protection they made, with both were hit at midway by 3 quarters apiece, albeit 1,000-pound weapons they not anticipated, even in protected draft designs, and they ended up being sunk. Rougeau succumbing to a similar barrel of bombs that the aircraft would measure somewhat later. The Imperial Japanese Navy now possessed full fleet carriers plus Rougeau, and with a variety of lessons learned, he was now in a position that its supplies should be made of similar ships, the Chicago class. With Hiryu laid down in 1936, the same year as Japan withdrew from the naval treaty system, the Shikakus could be laid down without the concerns about treaty limits on available displacements, and although ordered only the next year, the ships were a huge step change. The Japanese Navy wanted a carrier that combined the best of all their previous ships, the significant defensive firepower of the refitted Kaga, the sheer carrying capacity of Akagi, and the speed of Soryu and Hiryu, as well as better armour and better operational range compared to any carrier, either current or projected, in Japanese, American, or British service. Thus, the new ship's displacement would be almost double the amount of water that Soryu had displaced, clocking in at just under 30,000 tons standard displacement, making it the largest dedicated fleet carrier design of the pre-war period. And they would also incorporate much more advanced damage control and a comprehensive torpedo defense system when compared to previous designs. One major issue, however, was only changed at the last minute. Initially, the ships were actually designed with a side island located about halfway along the ship. The idea was to help balance the ship, as the weight of the island would offset the weight of the exhausts on the starboard side, and also increase the overall amount of open space that was available on the forward part of the flight deck for takeoffs, it being thought that about half the deck length was enough for landings. The latter was the more important of the two factors, but the exhausts were in the way of a starboard side island at that desired location, and forcing side alignment had the happy benefit of the aforementioned balancing effect. But whilst Shikoku was in advanced stages of construction, experiments on Akagi from both it and initially trials from Kiryu began to indicate that a side island was not such a good idea, which, coupled with an increasing realization that newer and heavier aircraft would need longer landing areas, compelled the relocation of the island to the starboard side. Whilst swing up having been started later, could have this change of easily Shoko, a partial sponsor of the bridge on the side already been built, and so whilst the island was in its starting position, she would still have a small sponsor left in place as a visual indicator which ship to which pass. Other innovations included a small autonomous valve system for speed running, while various sources did argue if it was one or the other of both ships that fitted with this, albeit that from available photos and the balance of sources, I'm inclined to go with both in this case, as Chicago definitely had this innovation, as we see from Tokyo photos, and it seemed a bit strange that the Suikoku, the second ship in the class, would somehow not be fitted with it. The ship's hangars were enclosed in keeping with Japanese design principles, although walls were lightly built and largely there for keeping the sea out rather than anything aggressive. Some thought being given to the idea of these sections failing under pressure to blow out in the event of a catastrophic event in the hangar, thus mitigating the effects of a significant explosion. Despite their greater size, the ships could still make over 30 knots thanks to a truly monstrous power plant, and they were designed to carry 72 and reserve aircraft, albeit that by the time they entered service, newer and larger aircraft in the constant vein of individual carrier designs meant that whilst 72 active aircraft were retained, the number of reserve airframes had dropped as well. Large, fast, well-protected, and large aircraft, the Chicago's represented exceptionally powerful aircraft carriers for their time, with massive displacement in help, with some argument being possible that, at least at the time of commissioning, they were the most powerful carriers in the world. Yet the technological advances of their great rapidity at the end of the 1930s and start of the 1940s, particularly in the anti-aircraft department, would exacerbate some of the ship's weaknesses and indeed create new ones. Most Japanese carriers at the end of the period would carry a defensive battery of 127mm dual-purpose guns, backed by batteries of the questionable 25mm gun in 14 pounds. Occasional machine guns would make an appearance, and were generally useful for the use of trace rounds to show the other guns where the enemy was coming from. The Japanese Navy's next carrier project was authorized in 1939, but only had work started in 1941, and some was outside the scope of this video, and that carrier was the Titan. The US Navy, meanwhile, faced a double challenge. Japan and indeed Britain had at least designed one ship ground up as a carrier each, ready, whilst each of the three carrier hulls in US service were conversions. So not only was the US Navy trying to expand its carrier fleet, but it was also trying to actually build a carrier hull for the first time. Still, Langley provided valuable lessons to draw upon, at least in terms of hangar arrangements and flight operations, whilst Lexington and Saratoga were still meeting. But there was an additional complicating factor. The US Navy was still complying with the naval treaty requirements, and it made sense to have similar carriers available in responsible clouds, which added up to 69,000 tons. When measured in long tons, the measured in the treaty system, this would allow for a class of 3 23,000 ton ships, 1,000 tons apiece, 5 just under 2,000 tons. A series of tabletop scale games the US Navy undertook to help develop tactics and strategy indicated that a carrier bound was a carrier's son, and so it would be better to have many smaller carriers so that some ones would still be left after any given strike. Additionally, within the sizes of ship dictated by the suggested displacements, you'd be able to actually carry 4 aircraft with 5 smaller carriers, assuming some design compromises, than 3 larger ones. This would start a persistent, again, relationship between the US Navy and some multiple carrier pilots. Although preliminary design work in the early 1990s considered designs with standard displacements ranging from 11,000 about to 27,000 tons each treaty limit in an effort to derive roughly increases and decreases in displacement as a carrier to gain ability. In the middle of all this came a rather surprising clash of priorities. Games predicted that a carrier would need to operate dive and torpedo bombers, while being a relatively near level dive bombing demonstrations was the flankies of the solid threat. And so the provision would be made for torpedo storage for torpedo bombers. In some ways this actually had slight advantages since the dive. But as this turned out in the later 1920s, estimates of dive effectiveness were somewhat low at this point, and this design decision hampered the ship in future roles. Additionally, again, because of the language available by lessons, the carrier would be designed without an island, and thus the exhaust from the engines would have control away separately. It was only as the big conversions came into service that the advantages of the island became apparent, and so what was hastily added to the ship construction resulted in a simple hybrid that had trumped exhausts and an island instead of an integrated island and funnel. This would also increase the ship's overall weight, taking up more of the limited tonnage that the US Navy had available. The designers also had to be dragged kicking and screaming away from the ship compared to triple-plated gun turrets, as the weight penalties of a ship this size were not great in order allowed to maintain a useful aircraft. Still, the US Navy had concluded that ideally they want a maximum size carrier, that is what built up to the 27,000 treaties, with variant designs being a soft carrier with a good deck, lots of aircraft and minimum defense equipment, as compared to a slower, heavily armed vessel with aircraft and galleons. At the other end was also some attempts at a 10,000-ton Marcus Hounds designed to exploit the same equipment that Radeon had, but the US Navy couldn't find a design that allowed their projected weights and sizes of future aircraft that would actually work, and so with the extremes combined, work settled back the 3 displacement models I mentioned earlier. Eventually, as the 1940s drew to a close, the USS Ranger as designed US Naval carriers at the time. An open hangar deck allowed aircraft from being taken up to the flight deck. There was provision for cross-deck catapults, yet could actually be installed to save cost and displacement. And she had the ability to operate as a carrier in reverse as well. Due to being a carrier from the start of the design process and thanks to the hangars, Ranger actually had more hangar space than Lexington's, as well as enough hangar height to carry a substantial disassembled aircraft suspended from the ceiling. In theory, she could carry 76 aircraft, the same as Lexington, on part of displacement. All of this being based on a battery of 1 guns and a substantial battery of machine guns, as well as plans to use a 1-inch cannon, whose primarily designed to deal with dive bombs. So, what's not to like? Well, there were compromises. The answer by the anti-aircraft kill the anti-aircraft battery, such as people around considerably over. was not as fast as the US Navy wanted, whilst able to hit just over 23 knots per day. This compared with the maximums, and the Rangers saw the size of the ships lost speed faster as the sea and weather, resulting in a rapid speed in most cases. Protection was also next to non-existent, with nothing in the way of a torpedo defense system, barely enough to protect her from small destroyer guns. Her shorter overall flight deck and questionable choices of elevator placement as a result of the deck, ultimately automated cross-deck catapults, meant that her speed of air operations was also somewhat reduced. And these issues became fairly rapidly apparent in the 1930s, and as a result, she would be restricted to low-threat environments during World War II. With more experience from Lexington and Saratoga available, and the first evaluations of the Ranger's potential, the US Navy was left with enough tonnage, 2 or 3 hulls at the top end, that they could build a couple of 27,000-ton carriers, hence the working earlier. They could build 3 18,500-ton carriers. Repeat Rangers were very quickly out of this capacity in the lowest dimension. The final option was also considered. 2 carriers that came in at just under 21,000 tons, along with a repeat of Ranger. The decision was quite difficult. The US Navy wanted to remedy many of the flaws of Ranger's design, which the larger carriers wanted to. But they also wanted hulls, and like the Japanese Navy, they really paired carrier operations were a good idea. Whilst some improvements could be made on an 18,500-ton hull, this didn't offer too much room for upgrades and leave the US Navy with a pair of large carriers, 3 medium carriers, and Ranger. Eventually, the decision was made to go with a compromise solution. Ranger, which would at least in theory be cheaper and have some autonomy. Such as reintroducing the government actually having a defense system going at higher speed, protection, and efficiency aircraft guns, as well as the idea of having 2 or 5 decks, accurately the ability to support aircraft. Operations flight deck. Almost immediately there was a debate as to what the increased levels of protection should take. Torpedo defense was a given, but some carrier which was planned to be used to Radeon Graphics and highlights should carry a strong practice service line with built-on protection. Others felt that other carriers would be making practice and tank protection and the A5 power should be prioritized. It was not that one bulkhead should impair a carrier's operations and 2 knockout operation. Casts completely removed the exercises, suggesting that whilst the carrier was not yet a decisive weapon, the ability to control the spies, scout, and where the enemy's fleet could be a major advantage, resulting in many exercises having one side harder than the others carrier first, to achieve the requisite best majority. It was so seriously given to the 20.5 flight deck, but with the other requirements associated with a large air group, bases and US Navy carriers at the time, it was decided that it was not possible to hit this on a carrier at this displacement without too much compromise in other areas. The man who tried to fit a couple of 8-inch guns to the Ranger nearly escaped his containment once again, as one of the various schemes during the design process, Scheme J, was larger but only carried 65 aircraft, had